Okay, so I want to welcome Ian Flockhart, Captain Ian Flockhart, to the first Captain Call podcast. Ian, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Very, very nice to be joining you.
I know you've been in the industry for around 25 years.
Yeah.
You've done various podcasts with Super Yacht News and a few others. You've been a captain on a variety of different sized vessels. But I also saw on LinkedIn that you've actually got over 250,000 nautical miles under your belt. It's pretty impressive, I think, by anyone's standards.
Yeah, that's correct. I had about 90,000 miles clocked up before I even entered the industry. So I came into the as a captain. That was as well. That wasn't total miles. That was 90,000 miles as a captain. So I came into the industry, with a lot of seagoing experience, albeit on smaller vessels. But it was all, it was great experience at the time.
Sure. So just to kind of set the scene for everybody listening, if you could just kind of explain to us where you actually started, and also how you got into the industry, and what was it that kind of made you want to join the kind of yachting industry?
Sure. Okay. I live on the west coast of Scotland, and I grew up here, but not until I was about 15. We didn't move back to Scotland because we come from originally till I was about 15. And the west of Scotland is a stunning cruising ground. So I'd always had an interest in, just like small, your kind of family yacht sort of thing. School was a bit weird for me. Didn't enjoy the whole experience. Didn't fit in very well. So didn't, through my own kind of choices, didn't follow the normal route at school and to go on to sort of tertiary education, which perhaps at the time wasn't the smartest thing to do, because after kind of not putting in a lot of effort at school, I soon realized that no one was going to give me a job. So I created one for myself. I set up a small sort of thing that was going to be a little cottage industry, which actually did quite well, and I ended up employing, including subcontractors, up to about 36 people, all by the time of my age was kind of 20, 21 years old. So I'd accrued enough money to buy my first yacht. So I bought a yacht that was actually built up here, a kind of old classic wooden thing, 35 foot, which I spent a couple of years completely rebuilding, and then I taught myself to sail really around the west coast of Scotland. And I signed up for the kind of the night classes for the RYA stuff, so I sort of did that as well at the same time. So that's how I got into yachts first off. I then very foolishly bought a larger yacht while I still owned the first one, which wasn't the smartest thing I've ever done. But that again was a Dutch built steel ketch, and I put her through MCA coding up to category 0. That meaning that we had no restrictions on where we could charter, so we could do high and low latitudes. We could basically go anywhere. So I set off doing some very serious ocean sailing with this vessel, and this is how I managed to have accrued almost 100,000 miles before I even decided to come into the yachting industry as we know it, shall we say. That came about because I think I was in Antigua in my own yacht, and I saw these like huge big yachts, and I kind of knew they existed, but I didn't realize there was such an industry attached to it. Saying that, in the mid 80s, the boats were a lot smaller and there wasn't so many of them. So because I'd spent so much time doing my own thing and traveling and sailing, the funds were getting very low. So I figured I needed to do something to get some money coming back in. So at the end of that transatlantic passage, we kind of came back to the UK, and then I toddled off down to Warsash, and I started doing all my courses to get what is now the Master 3,000 ton, and then I kind of entered the industry as we know it. So that's the basic background. That's how I kind of fell into it almost, to be honest, because sailing was purely a hobby for me. It was just something that I loved to do, and then kind of through necessity, because as we all know, boats drain your funds very rapidly, and I just had to find something to get myself back on my feet after spending a lot of time sailing around and enjoying the whole exercise. So it was just a kind of natural progression of something to sort of fall into, because I was already fairly well experienced, on the smaller, but shall we say very capable sailing vessels, which I was used to being on. So that's the background.
That's fantastic. And so when you first started, was that around, say, 25 years ago, 1994?
Oh no, no, way before that. It was in the. I think I bought my first boat in about 1982, something like that.
Fantastic. Yeah. Fantastic. So that leads on to my next question quite well. So cast your mind back to 1992. And
1982 that was, sorry. 1982. Yeah. No, I was very young. I was very, very young.
Sure. Okay. So go back to 1982 to the present day. What are the most fundamental changes that you've seen in the industry over the interim?
I think probably the most noticeable thing is that yachts have got so much larger, and there are so many of them. I mean, it's become. If you look at some simple graphs for the sort of, the growth of high net worth individuals over the last couple of decades, particularly, it's just absolutely skyrocketed. Couple of events that happened that fueled that enormously that will probably never be repeated, because they both kind of happened at the same time. And that was the collapse of what was the Soviet Union and the deregulation of financial services in the United States. And these two things kind of happened at the same time. And if you look at the charts, for purchases of yachts, there was just this phenomenal spike during that period, which has tailed off significantly, though there's still a lot happening. So I think the size of the yachts and the sheer number of yachts that there are now, that would be the most significant thing, I would say, that's happened. Other things relating to crew, quite a change in the dynamic, I would say, of a lot of the type of crew that we're dealing with now. A lot of people kind of realized that there was good money to be made in yachting. So a lot of the kind of millennial generation coming into it with a perspective that perhaps wasn't as realistic as people that had been in it before were used to. A lot of naivety, and I think a lot of people coming into the industry with a general lack of life experience, because people were coming into the industry, I think, at a much earlier age, almost like finish, their kind of education, gap year, and then they're straight into yachting with very, very little life experience behind them. So that's been something that's quite significant, I think, as well. A bit of a shift in dynamic from old money to new money, I think, has been very noticeable, in terms of the people that are now buying yachts. Definitely a shift there, and a much stronger grip, for better or worse, on the industry from management companies.
Sure, I fully agree. One thing I think as well that's it's worth noting is the advent of social media.
Yeah.
It's completely changed the landscape. The way people find jobs, the way people look for jobs, the way people present themselves. Would you say, in your opinion, going on, your last answer, would you say that social media has changed the perception of the industry?
Without any shadow of doubt whatsoever. Social media is here to stay, like it or not. It's extremely powerful. However, you can't always believe what you see anywhere these days. You know, you can't even believe what you see on news channels sometimes.
Sure.
And no more is this more evident than in social media. I look over a lot of the yachting group pages on a daily basis just to see what's happening, and some of the stuff you hear people talking about, they just speak with such a lack of authority. It's quite incredible. And sadly, a lot of people will be taken in by what some of these people are saying. A very good example of that, because you see it so frequently. You'll see some unfortunate crew member, moaning about the fact that they've left the boat and they owe them money. And I can speak through bitter experience of this myself. You know, I'm still wrapped up in a 2.5-year legal battle to reclaim a substantial amount of money of a boat that isn't even in the water yet. And I can tell you from personal experience, it's not easy to do. You know, it's difficult and it's very expensive to do. This is just a good example. You know, you hear the comments that people throw in, you know, they'll just get the boat arrested. And it's just, you know, there's a tremendous lack of understanding of the complexity of some of these issues. Sure. So I think people have to be very wary, you know, what they read and what they pay attention to on social media. And in terms of general perspective, you know, this portrayal that it's this, you know, fabulous lifestyle, yes, there is an element of that to it. If you happen to be lucky enough to work for a good owner on a great boat where you've got a good captain, good crew, consistency in your employment, then, you know, it can be a very good career. But I would say for a very significant amount of people that work in the industry, all of those circumstances don't slot into place all at once, and it can be a very, very challenging career to work in. So I think people need to be very careful what they believe, certainly before they make a decision to come into the industry. They really need to get their facts straight about what's really involved in it.
Sure. So I think, you know, certain platforms like, say, Instagram, for example, you know, really visual platforms, you know, there's certain companies out there that are just kind of posting boats or posting pictures of boats in kind of glamorous locations. A lot of crew post, you know, pictures of where they are, you know, which is fantastic, you know, make the most of the good parts of the industry. But I think that does filter through, you know, like you say, to maybe some green people, you know, green crew that are coming into the industry. That, you know, I'm sure they're not completely naive, that there's some work involved, but maybe not fully aware of the extreme levels of work that really are involved.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, in my opinion, you know, yachting should be exclusively populated by highly competent, qualified and experienced people, because one, that's what the environment demands that we're working in, and two, it's what the clientele demand as well. And sadly, it's not populated with as many such people as perhaps it ought to be. And I believe that social media has had a big part to play in these deficiencies in terms of the shall we say, you know, the quality of some people that are in the industry. Because look, I mean, no harm to them. You know, we may be talking about people that could excel in a different environment, but yachting is not for everybody. And yet, you know, there's such a massive flood of people coming into it every year, and all you have to do is interview some of these people face to face to just know from the beginning that they're just absolutely not cut out for yachting.
Sure. And I think it's quite interesting as well, you know, obviously from a recruitment perspective, you know, we sift through hundreds of CVs every single day, you know, trying to find, you know, the relevant candidates for the relevant position. But in your opinion, as a captain that's gone through, I'm sure, hundreds of CVs, how can you determine from a CV, so let's be honest, it's the first impression, you know, and it gives you some kind of substance as to the person. How can you tell from a CV if somebody's likely to be good or not? Because otherwise you'd be interviewing hundreds of people. How do you kind of shortlist on the back of a CV?
I think from a CV on its own, it's extremely difficult to do, because anybody can write whatever they want on a CV. And if they're not that great at penning it themselves, they can quite easily get professional help on it. You know, they can talk to friends in the industry. They can use all the buzzwords. It's very, very easy for someone who isn't that great to put together a fairly reasonable CV, notwithstanding obviously their experience is the bit where they shouldn't be able to make that up. Perhaps some of them do. You'd like to think so. So if we just keep the actual work history out of it for a second, it's quite easy to get a well-written CV. It's easy to get a photograph where you're very appropriately presented for this industry. It's, as I say, when you're writing your opening line, your profile, your objectives, it's very, very simple to write all the kind of stuff that most employers are going to want to hear. The work experience bit is the bit that I tend to look at first, because all the opening salvo is usually fairly similar no matter who it is. They're all saying the same kind of stuff, but what I want to know is, what boats have they been on? How long have they been on there? What have they done? And their referees. Yeah, critically important. So many people just don't follow up on references, and I don't know why. In my opinion, the only way to follow up on a reference is on the telephone. It has to be an interactive thing. A person that might have been great on one boat may be disastrous on another boat because it's a different size, it's a different kind of owner, and I think you only get to the bottom of what someone's really about by having a proper conversation, over the phone with a person that has worked with them. And they might make one little comment that might open a whole new route to go down to dig deeper to find out more about that. So sorry, I've digressed from your question slightly there, but it is a very important point. So I think it's and anyone can write the correct stuff in the, shall we say, the more generic parts of the CV, but what is going to catch your eye probably is, what boats have they worked on? That was a difficult boat, or it was like a boat I was on 4.5 years in Qatar. Now, anyone that can stick, working 4.5 years in Qatar has got something about them, that might say, okay, well, it might be worth talking to this person, because it's a challenging role. It's a place that most people don't want to be, but if they've managed to, to stick with it, then maybe that will be, something to pick up on. So, looking at the types of boat, if you know anything about the history of the boat, if they're particularly difficult, if they're very busy, you may know that they've got very challenging owners, things like this. And then obviously looking for a kind of level of, career progression as well. Have they climbed up the ladder relatively fast? Try to get to the bottom of why that's happened. Was it just by happenstance, or was it, purely through merit that they may have got through? But I think it's very difficult just on a CV alone. I have a very simple triage system that I'm sure a lot of people do. There's ones that just don't get a second look, end of story. There's ones that you'll come back to if you have to. And then there's ones that, that just kind of go, oh yeah, this looks quite interesting. So there's an immediate triage for me. That's the process that I go through. And then from a fairly early stage, I'll be contacting referees.
Sure. And how would that work? Would the same rules apply for somebody that's completely green? So let's say, for example, there's a Stu applying for a position. She's completely green. She's got, say, hospitality background. Yeah. Would you be looking at the transferable skills, or would you be more looking at longevity in those roles, or what would you be looking for?
We're talking about just from a first look at a CV, not with any actual proper interaction with the person.
Sure, yeah. So kind of looking at it, just say you get sent a load of CVs, so you've got 10 CVs, you want to shortlist it to 3, say they're all greenies.
Yep.
What would you then do? What would your process involve?
First thing I'd look for on particularly greener people is a photograph.
Sure. Okay.
It is unforgivable in this day and age to not have a photograph on your CV that is pretty damn close to perfect in terms of how it should be. It is so important. I cannot stress that enough. Even modern, smartphones can take astonishingly good photographs now. And all you have to do is, choose a kind of neutral background, have good quality and direction of light, and you can get a great picture. And assuming the person is properly groomed and presented, doesn't have appendages and unnecessary things on that are going to do it. And keep the photograph strictly to head and shoulders is another thing I would make. There's been a tremendous trend in the last few years, of girls in particular trying to show themselves in a different light that has extended way beyond a head and shoulders shot because they're trying to portray something else. And I think that's I don't think that's very smart at all. As most industries don't even want a photograph on a CV. It's not acceptable in many industries, but yachting is obviously unique. So pay a lot of attention to making sure that you've got a very appropriate photograph on your CV. That would be the first thing. The second thing I'd say is do not deviate in any way, probably, from a very standard format CV. As anyone, I'm sure you'll appreciate this yourself because you look at tons of CVs. How wonderful would it be if every CV looked exactly the same apart from the content of the text, because you'd know where to look for every single piece of information. You've got hundreds to go through in a week. It would make your life so easy. So when people say, "Oh, but I want to stand out," well, you make yourself stand out by who you are, what you've achieved, by your character. Yeah, you don't make yourself stand out by having some wacky looking CV that's got weird fonts and bold colours and big blocks here, there, and everywhere, because that just becomes a nightmare for the person that has to go over so many CVs, and yours is has deviated so much from a standard format. It just makes the recruiter's job very difficult. So that would be another thing I would say. So in terms of how does somebody green present themselves in a way, I think it's a lot of the people we're talking here aren't going to be that long out of school. They're going to be 19, 20, maybe 21 years old. It's not easy for them because they have got extremely limited life skills, and unless they're quite exceptional, they'll also probably have extremely limited specific skills in any particular field. I think, again, if it's, in your scenario there, it was a stewardess, so the first thing you'd be looking at, well, what was the quality of the establishment she was working in? Yeah. Sure. If she was working in some very high-end restaurant in London, then maybe that's a good flag straight away that she's managed to she's working in Claridge's, for example. Then straight off you're gonna know that she's probably of a fairly high standard, as opposed to the person that's just done a few short-term jobs in some coffee shop that serves food as well. So I think looking at the quality of the establishment is a good place to go. Longevity is very difficult because the people we're talking about are generally so young. It's very hard for them to have got the foot in the door anyway. So the longevity thing, sure, if someone's straight out of school and works in a place for 18 months and then they're coming looking for a job on a yacht, then that's probably quite impressive. Because the young people seem to have a very short attention span these days. So if they've managed to stick at something like that, when they're still so young for a period, then that shows some level of commitment, be it through necessity or through willingness to do so. It still says something, I think. So it's not easy especially when they're that young, when they have so little life experience, when they have so little, let's just call it technical experience in whatever field it is they're in. The two things that I find very important that are very, very difficult to put across on a CV, and I wish I knew the answer to this, because it would be magic if you could somehow, get this across in a more authentic way on a CV, and that is work ethic and character. Now, everyone can say, yeah, I've got a great work ethic, but your idea of a great work ethic might be very different to my idea of a great work ethic, and I'm really not sure how you can put that across on a CV. You may have the best work ethic in the world, but when you just see the statement, I have a strong work ethic. Well, I mean, almost every CV that you see in yachting has that statement on it, but you don't know, whether it's disingenuous or not. It's just some, a buzzword that they've put in because they know they have to. And it's something that you have to leave it till the next stage when you get into an interview and try and find out a bit more. And then again, the best way to check up on that is referees. They'll soon tell you if the person was a real grafter, or whether they spent every minute they possibly could checking their Facebook page on their phone. So it's
completely agree. Another thing that I wanted to touch on as well, so when a crew member is actively seeking employment, and it's, before they get an interview, certain things that any particular crew member can do, whether they're green or existing crew.
Yeah.
Do you think social media is being used enough? The channels, the LinkedIn, Facebook, it's used for glamorizing certain areas of industries. But do you think it's being used enough to help people get a job in a networking capacity?
One of the first pieces of advice that I give to anybody when I'm mentoring, one of the first questions I ask them are you on LinkedIn? And you would be astonished at how many people in yachting are not on LinkedIn. LinkedIn has become the most powerful professional networking platform for good reason. It works very, very well, and I can't understand why every single yacht crew member would not be on LinkedIn and put the effort in to make their profile look good and be very proactive on it. Now, again, there's a flip side to that, in that sadly the recruiters haven't embraced it. And I don't get this at all. All the recruiters are using Facebook. And the two are like chalk and cheese to me. LinkedIn is so professional, and I really do not understand why our industry has not embraced LinkedIn in a much more meaningful way. They've all they're all using Facebook, but possibly because the audience are much more in tune with Facebook. But I'm quite sure if the industry said, okay guys, we're gonna move over to LinkedIn, then they would all follow suit. So I think perhaps there's a bit of responsibility there for the recruiting side of the industry to become a lot more proactive in trying to promote a much more professional platform like LinkedIn to be their go-to tool.
Without a shadow of doubt. And again, from a recruitment standpoint, so one of the ways that we headhunt now, let's be honest, a lot of recruiters, when they get a position come in, they'll post straight on Facebook. Yeah. And then 9 times out of 10, that'll be the nuts and bolts of the recruitment process. But if you look further afield and to platforms such as LinkedIn, there are an abundant amount of crew on there, but nowhere near numbers that that there should be. Now, what I found, and our consultants have found as well, when we're headhunting for a specific position, let's say a first officer, we'll go onto LinkedIn and we'll go through the first officers that are on there. Okay, go through their history, make sure we can kind of find someone that suits the profile we've been given. But the amount of times that we've directly messaged these individuals, and it's taken a week for them to get back to us. There's some people that aren't on LinkedIn, and there's some people that are half pregnant on LinkedIn, so to speak. And it makes the process really tough. If you found someone that could be potentially really good, yet they're not active on LinkedIn, as you said, it's an extremely powerful tool for a recruiter and also for somebody looking to be recruited. It really is. I don't think it gets enough attention.
No, it doesn't. I completely agree with you. I've been on LinkedIn for years, but I didn't really start using it properly till about a year ago. And a lot's happened for me in that year. I've made some very good connections. Something that I've found about it, the most notable thing for me is the willingness, the openness of people to connect with you through LinkedIn. Whereas if you sent them an email, if you happened to have their email address, you probably wouldn't get a response from them. I'm not sure why it is. But people are so much more willing to connect with you on LinkedIn. I think, I don't know why it's being so neglected. I mean, the same people you just mentioned there would probably have responded instantly if they got something on Facebook. And I think, as I say, maybe it falls, on responsibility of the recruiters to, to push it and say to people, right, look, this is this is our preferred platform. And if you want to, if you want to be more serious about it, then this is really the platform that you should be using. Well, one of the other things about LinkedIn as well, the amount of trash that appears on Facebook, you hardly ever see anything that is that contentious on LinkedIn. It is so much more professional. And that in itself is a good bit of advice for for Green Crew. Go to where the information and just the general quality of the content is so much higher than than on a platform like Facebook that is just absolutely riddled with utter nonsense a lot of the time.
Sure. And one thing as well with LinkedIn, I think, as you said, it's a different setting altogether.
Yep.
Facebook, if you're trying to network, you're trying to connect, don't get me wrong, if you're in the industry, normally people will connect to you. But I think it's the mentality. When people are on LinkedIn, it's work related. They're specifically on there for work related issues. So for somebody that's coming into the industry and wants to keep all their options open, give themselves the best possible chance to opening a door, it needs to be on LinkedIn as well as Facebook and everything else, without a shadow of a doubt. And also one thing, that I'd be interested to hear your feedback on is I'm really proactive on networking. I think at the end of the day, social media is the gateway to networking at scale. You can do it at home. You don't need to be out at parties spending hundreds of pounds, or whatever the case may be. You can do it whilst you're at home, and the opportunities really are endless. So what I always advise people to do, and I've had this conversation with our consultants to kind of relay this message, is that reach out on LinkedIn to different people. So for example, if you're a deckhand, or say you're a green deckhand, reach out to a few deckhands that are currently on a boat size that you want to get on, and ask them how they've found, their amount of years so far in the industry.
Yep.
Ask them how, what challenges they've come up against. Number one, it's going to give them a better understanding of what they're about to get themselves into.
Yep.
But number two, you've got that connection, and funny things happen the more connections you get.
Yep, absolutely.
Doors start opening. And I'm not necessarily saying by any stretch of the imagination, ask for a job on their boat. In fact, quite the opposite of that.
Yep.
But nevertheless, having these connections really does help.
Yeah, no, it does. It really does. It's a very, very powerful platform, and I think it's a shame that it's not used a lot more. But as I say, I think the recruiters need to up the ante on it to bring it more to the forefront of people, because as you say, it's 99.9% professional on LinkedIn, whereas Facebook is it's probably the converse. It's mostly just social and other kind of stuff that is not important for people's work, and there's only a very small professional element to it. Another thing that I do, I respond to every single message that I get on LinkedIn. Sure. I also respond to every single message that's yachting related on Facebook. Sure. I will get messages from people who are like Filipino laundry stewards, very lowly in the game, and I give them my time and respond to every single one of them. Sure. Without exception. Sure. I think it's the right thing to do. It doesn't matter, where they come from, how far down the pecking order they are. To be honest, I'm probably even more proactive with the people. Filipinos is a good example. I quite frequently just get messages, from Filipinos that have either worked on ships and want to move over, and without exception, I get back to them as soon as I can. Say, yeah, hi, what can I do to help you? I think it's the right thing to do. It's nice that people are coming to you looking for advice, and yeah, it can be a bit time consuming, but it's the right thing to do, and I do it in all circumstances.
Absolutely fantastic, and that's what I was going to mention. Actually, I know you're currently looking for your next command.
Yeah.
But you're also aggressively active on some of the social networks. I know LinkedIn, which is where we actually met.
Yeah.
Facebook and a few others. Can you just tell us a bit more about the kind of crew mentoring that you're currently doing?
Yeah, I've got. I've been mentoring crew since ever I've been a captain. It's just, I mean, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. Mentoring is extremely important. However, I think it has a very particular importance in yachting because of the uniqueness of our industry, especially if you're on a busy boat. You can be away for months on end. You can struggle to have anyone else to talk to about your career progression, about any issues that are going on board. It can be very, very difficult, whereas most normal people, they put their coat in the hook when they get back at home at night, and they can talk to their friends, their family, their wives, whatever, and they can get this kind of unique advice from all sorts of other people. But on a yacht, it can be extremely difficult, and I think it is incumbent upon every master of a vessel to play some kind of role in this. It doesn't always have to be the master. I mean, on a larger boat, the go-to person may in fact not be the master. On a very large yacht, it might be, for example, a first officer or a purser. Particularly if it's one of the female crew that have got an issue, they may feel more comfortable. But somebody needs to do it. It is so important in seafaring. There has to be somebody there that people can talk to. And my door's always been open. So what I've been doing this for years, and I still do a lot of pro bono mentoring. But I've recently just launched a website, part of my company, that's doing a couple of things. And one of the things is I've set up a proper professional crew mentoring service, just specifically for yacht crew.
Sure. And does that cover all levels, I guess?
Anybody, absolutely anybody, from people that aren't even in the industry yet to people that have been in a long time. And whether it's reviewing CVs, or one of the things that I think is quite important, and there are other channels that people can use for this, is I get emails from people just say, X, Y, and Z are happening on board. What should I do? That's really quite a common thing that comes up, because we mentioned earlier on a tremendous amount of naivety in the industry, and people are enduring situations that because they simply don't know where to go to get advice on them. Sometimes asking another crew member or someone on Facebook, is not the place to go, because they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the life experience, they don't have the maritime experience to be able to, even if it's not answer the question, but to point someone in the right direction as to where they may best go to get these issues resolved. Most of the time it's something I can help with, but not always, especially when you start getting into legal territory. But still, anyone who's been at sea for a long time is going to have a fair understanding of of the framework and what is and is not acceptable.
Sure.
So it's reasonably easy to advise on that.
Well, I think that finally that kind of wraps things up quite nicely. If somebody's looking to get some additional help, or speak to somebody, or just get that bit of kind of advice, where can they find you?
I've set up a separate website which is called the yachtcrewmentor.com. I'm in the process of looking at developing a mobile app for it, because I built it on desktop and it looks great on desktop, but it transferred very, very badly to mobile, which was a bit of a mistake, given there's most of the audience for this.
90% or so,
there was supposed to be a reasonable level of responsiveness in the app that I used, but it didn't work very well. So I think I need to start from scratch and actually build it into an app. And there's also a Facebook page of the same name, but there's all there is on the Facebook page is I just put posts and blog things up there, etc. But the actual the website, the yachtcrewmentor.com, is the main website. But as I say, until I get it sort of transferred into a mobile app, it's going to look a bit funny to anyone that's looking at it on a smaller device. So in the short term, if you want to have a look at it, do try and look at it on a desktop, please, until I can get that fixed.
Sure. And you're also on LinkedIn as well?
Yeah, absolutely, on LinkedIn, yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, listen, Ian, it's been an absolute pleasure. Really do appreciate your time today, and I'm sure the information is going to be of some great help to new crew and old alike. But yeah, really appreciate your time today.
Okay, very welcome. Thank you.